My guests today are co-writers David S. Lee, Darwin Shaw, and Will Hawks of the Oscar-qualified and multi-award-winning short film, The Last Ranger. Now, David S. Lee has appeared in blockbuster projects such as Geostorm and Get Smart, Black Panther, and Blood Diamond. But he is the executive producer, actor, story, and co-writer of The Last Ranger, playing the part of Robert in this stunning film. Now, Darwin Shaw is co-founder of When the World Stopped and producer and co-writer of The Last Ranger, and he can be seen in a variety of feature films, including Casino Royale, Prince of Persia and Prometheus, Son of God, even John Carter, and he notably played St. Peter in the Emmy-nominated television series, The Bible. Now, Will Hawks is also co-producer and writer of The Last Ranger and has worked as an actor and director for over 10 years with the TV roles in Grimm, Little Big Lies, and The Politician, and Hollywood. And his film credits include the indie hits Sun Valley, First Comes Like, and Devil's Hollow. Now, all three of them have brought us their Oscar-qualified short film, The Last Ranger, and the film follows a young girl named Letha, who lives in the struggling Kosher communities near the game reserves. Now, Letha meets the last remaining ranger and learns about the rhino's struggle for survival, and she is quickly drawn into a dangerous situation that threatens not only the rhinos, but also herself and the Last Ranger. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the co-writing and producing team of the Oscar-qualified short, The Last Ranger, David S. Lee, Darwin Shaw, and Will Hawks to the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
What a terrific introduction. Gosh, when you say it out loud like that, it's so impressive.
Well, I will tell you what, it took me a while to cut it all down because all three of you have quite the resumes when it comes to film, and I could have just gone on and on with more of what incredible work all of you have done. But David, I'm going to start off with you because you are the story writer for The Last Ranger. So what inspired you to write this incredible story of poaching and the rangers who protect the rhinos?
Thank you. It's something that's very close to my heart. Growing up in South Africa, I went on weekends and weeks away to game reserves all my life. A dear friend of mine that I grew up with in boarding school, they rewilded their farm, which was a livestock farm, and combined properties with surrounding farms and reintroduced natural game to those areas. And they now have a big 5 game reserve. He went on to become a wildlife vet. And over the years, as poaching has increased and crept into their surrounding areas, he gets called out on all these crime scenes where poachers have decimated the rhinos. And they either have to euthanize the rhinos if they're beyond help, or in this case, they try to save the rhino and they move forward with them. So they assess all of that. And I was with Will in 2018, and we were on his game reserve, and I went with him to a crime scene, and the rhino had been killed, and the horn had been stripped from its face, and it was just a horrific scene. And I sat with them as they basically performed an autopsy to find any evidence that they could use against the criminals, and later on, hopefully, try and prosecute those criminals for the crimes. And I was in a state of helplessness. At that point in my life, I was very aware of not having contributed much to society and the world. And this kind of shouted out at me that this was an opportunity for me to do something. And I spoke to Will. His name's Dr. William Foles. And I said to him, what can I do? And he said, go back to Hollywood and tell the story. Keep people engaged, keep people talking about what is happening, because people forget very easily. And so I came back to the States and I started writing a script. And I ran into Will and Darwin through the grace of the film gods, and we got it together and we got the story out.
Well, is this based on a true story? Because I know towards the end of the film, I actually saw the photo, and I hope I pronounce her name right, the photo of Tandy, the rhino.
Yes, yeah, it's exactly it. In 2012, she was poached for her horn. She was in a crash of 3 rhinos. There were 2 males and her being the female. When they got to the scene, they had to euthanize the one male straight away, and then they tried to save the two rhinos, the male and the female Tandi. And then unfortunately, I think it was Tamba was the male, and he succumbed to his wounds. But the team, over a couple of months, they managed to save this rhino, and it had never been done before. And they nursed her back to health, and she went on
Don't
give
away the ending.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Live a great life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is based on her, and she is a beacon of hope in the industry, in the rhino industry, in the conservation industry, because of what she overcame. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredible film, but I have to ask Darwin and Will, for both of you, what intrigued you about co-writing as well as producing The Last Ranger?
Shall I start off?
Go for it.
So basically, Will and I came together at the beginning of the pandemic to create stories in different communities around the world about what was happening. And in this way, we were acting much more like showrunners. So we were basically collecting stories, and we had well over 100 stories by the end of the first 6 months. And we were working with writers who'd never written much before, some more experienced writers. And, you know, it actually became a sort of a development process between the two of us. So we would be up all hours of the night on different time zones, working together and working with the writers. And then gradually we realized that these stories needed to fit together. So they weren't just disparate stories. They had to kind of have a sense of wholeness as a group. And we basically then realized that we had to be involved in that process.
And Will?
Yeah, it was a really incredible experience. Obviously, that time was super impactful for all of us. And I think it was a time that inflicted immense pressure on a lot of systemic issues that were happening in different communities around the world. And we wanted to help those communities tell those stories. And as we developed this series, like Darwin was saying, it collected into an anthology series called When the World Stopped, 24 stories from 20 different communities around the world in the time of the pandemic. And while we were developing these stories, we realized there were more than just 24. There were tons of communities around the world and a lot of different issues that need a light shown on them. So we developed a nonprofit called Kindred that works with artists and develop stories about systemic issues in their communities and thread them together so then they can be shown on the global stage. And then we use those films to partner with charities that are aligned with the themes of each film. And we work with educators to screen them in classrooms to inspire students to advocate for things that they care about.
You know, one of the things that I loved about The Last Ranger, and I've noticed this film season, there's a lot of social impact films, but this film literally takes it to the next level. Why was the intense emotion so important for this film?
Well, basically, yeah. So basically, we love documentaries, and we believe that documentaries are incredibly important and do important work and entertainment around the world. But when you're actually watching a narrative film, and all our films are narrative, you're actually inside the characters, and we felt that that was very much the important impact. And because all three of us are actors, we are kind of miners of emotion. So, you know, we wanted these films to really hit people's hearts and really affect them. And in a short film, that's obviously quite challenging because you have to have enough time to really connect with the characters. So our film is on the longer side, but I think we get the payoff that you really care about them.
Well, and this is the thing that makes this film unique and extremely special. Any film that is over 20 minutes long in the short film category has a difficult time being accepted in film festivals. But this film has become a multi-award winning film. What intrigued all of these film festivals to accept The Last Ranger?
I think it's the depth of the story and the encompassing of all the different points of view around this important issue. David really came with this incredible story that wasn't just about the rangers and the poachers. It was about the impact on the community around these game reserves. And I mean, no child grows up wanting to poach a rhino, right? There's a lot of systemic issues and uh, pressuring factors that get to that point, and we wanted to explore in a three-dimensional way how human beings get to that point to be able to um, explore and expand on the issue to get to the root of the problem. And I think that because of the three dimensionality and the depth of these characters, I know myself, I connect with the story through them. So by the time we get to the drama at the end, I'm really emotionally invested. And David really, we think, hit a home run with that.
Yeah,
Thanks. I'll
most.
add to that point.
No,
Yeah,
go ahead.
is that intensity that you speak of? I grew up around that. With families who, are just trying to survive and they don't have anything. In the Eastern Cape, where I grew up at school, there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of have-nots, and on the farms, these families will do anything they can to support each other, and it's a great, great, great community, but it's a struggle. And growing up and talking to Will over the years, Will Foles, Dr. Foles, I've sort of absorbed so much information about the struggles of the surrounding communities, and so not only is it a rhino issue, but it's this whole umbrella that happens beneath that. And so the stories that I chose, some of them are based on people that are stories that I know of through William. And I was checking in with him consistently along the line, and I'd say to him, I'm writing this storyline. Am I going too far? And he would correct course or not. He'd be like, no, that's 100%. So I think with the help of Will and Darwin, we managed to write the script and find all those nuances and find the reality in all of those people, not just a character. So there is so much history and reality coming along with it that I think it really makes a solid mark and acknowledges the pain and the life and the love and the suffering that goes along with that.
And that's what's so incredible about this film. When you watch it, you get this grand feeling that you're watching a documentary. But then there's this story within this documentary feel, and very quickly the audience starts to understand who the characters are. So this is one of the greatest short films I've seen this year because you don't have to spend a lot of time doing a character development. We're thrust into the characters. We know their parts, their place in this film, and I want to focus on the ranger because there are elements in this film more towards the end about the life of these rangers. And David, when you were doing a lot of research, was there something about the rangers and the rangers' life that surprised you the most?
The biggest surprise to me was the pride that they carry in the work that they do. There's a lot of people, I've met a lot of people along the way who are, they're happy with their job and they like working on the reserves. But these rangers, man, they'll take it to the end. They will put themselves in front of a bullet, and they will go all the way. They believe in it as a life source, so they don't see it as a short-term fix. They see this as a livelihood, something that they can pass on to their children, and something that can become the pride of a community, and in that way lift everybody along with them. And their dedication, their pride, their commitment, it yeah, that's really quite something to behold when you're with them and they engage you with why they're doing it. It's so, I mean, I get chills thinking about it because they're so incredibly passionate and committed to it.
Yeah, and I love the way that you did this story in this film because it's placed during the pandemic. There's no tourists coming to the game reserve to look at all of the beautiful animals. And so they're not really getting paid, but there's this pride in that work and the protection of the creation that I found so inspiring. Now, what ticked me off was that poachers have no regard for life. It being either the animal or the rangers. I mean, anybody who gets in their way, they have no problem pulling the trigger, which really, for me, is shocking because with animals, they're only after one particular piece of the animal. If it's a rhino, they want the horn. If it's the elephants, they want the tusk. And everything else is just left. And it's very slim chance if the animal is even going to survive that. So I'm not going to give it away, but there is a part in this film. I have seen this film multiple times, and I have to confess that in this particular scene that I'm not going to give away, I literally had to turn away because I love animals so much that just the scene, the sound, and the thought of harm, I literally had to close my eyes during the scene. And I'm sure much of the audience did too, didn't they?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty unique when you're sitting in a theater at these film festivals, and you feel this wave of emotion, the ups and the downs that the audience are going through. And one of the first times we watched this, I think it was at the Pan African Film Festival with an audience, and we were on alert the whole time to listening to these reactions, and it hit home, and it really just sounded the bell for us that we'd done the right thing by choosing this, and also teaming up the way we did to lift the script and to drive the characters home.
Y'all chose Cindy Lee to direct. How did you get Cindy involved with this project?
I knew her. She was my sister.
That works out.
Yeah. So my late mother was also an industry giant in South Africa, and in fact, she was a part of the Academy, and she had a couple of Emmy nominations. And so I grew up surrounded by film. So when I was writing the script, she was a good go-to point for me, and in the early days. And then my sister, who's a director in South Africa, is very passionate about conservation as well. And I really wanted to keep it as close to home as I could. And I've seen her work over the years. She's won multiple awards for her directing and her writing. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I'd asked her before I even showed her the script, and she said yes. Thank you. So that was lucky. And that was just, for me, that was a good catalyst because of her connections that she has in South Africa, because I left South Africa in December of 2000. So, my connections had depleted quite significantly. So I asked the boys, I said, guys, what do you think? How would you feel about it? And they stepped up immediately. They said, yeah, let's talk.
I want to get into the storyline because if people will watch this film very closely, it's a very unbiased storyline because you involve multiple characters with different points of view, which is why this film is so good, because you left no stone unturned in this film. I'm going to try. I'm working very hard not to give anything away in this film. So if you say can't answer that, I understand. But for any one of you, you created a very difficult dynamic between the daughter and the father. Why did you do that? Because he comes across as two things. provider, and villain.
Yeah, Darwin, you want to take that?
You guys take that.
No, you take it, Will. You take it.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate pressure that is coming down on the rhinos is the cartels, right? They're the ones with the money. They're the ones that are dealing weapons and drugs and using tusks and rhino horns as sweetener in their deals. They're the ones that are creating the propaganda for the need, the false propaganda for the value of these items. It's all a money play. They're the ones coming down, dangling money, threatening members of the community to be involved. It is a systemic issue that's bigger, not just in the community in the Eastern Cape, but in the country and the continent. It's a global enterprise that is doing this. So we wanted to tell the full story of everyone on the ground in this community, of the rangers, of the poachers, of the community around it, to get a sense of this impact on all of them. And we are all faced with choices in life. And no matter what pressures are on us and what our background is. And so we wanted to incorporate that in the story, that choice making, and ultimately following through with it or changing tactic, or, however that happens in the story. We won't get into the details, but it's really about the choices we make and the pressures that are on us and what we can step up and do in the moment. And hopefully that inspires people watching this to step up and take action for this rhino, and give some support and awareness to these magnificent creatures.
Well, it created a complete balance of the storyline, because I kept looking at Letha, her father, the ranger, Robert, and of course the poachers. So everything in this film is so well balanced that, like I said, you covered every angle to create an absolute complete story. So I'm going to direct this one to you, Darwin. And again, y'all can tell me to be quiet if I bring something up. So I'm trying to avoid certain things, but the ranger, Kuselwa, she engages with the poachers. You did not hide anything from the audience. You made us live through the terror of that moment, including the situation with the rhino, and literally my heart broke. And I know that we talked a bit about the emotion of this film, but that series of scenes, man, that was tough to get through.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Will and I were really clear about is that none of these, we didn't want to make we wanted to try and have an action scene, but it didn't want to be a shoot 'em up. And we wanted to, if we're going to do something there, we have to tell the story how it really would be, which is not really how action films go. And heroes aren't always Bruce Willis. They have different things, and sometimes smaller actions are heroic, and sometimes the heroes don't win, like in Rocky. But I think the reason why it is so harrowing is because, again, coming from very much an acting point of view, we really spent a lot of time. I mean, it's making the backstory of all the characters. So although it's not spoken about in the film, we hope that the audience will understand sort of subconsciously where this woman is coming from. That she's probably lost a child. She doesn't have children of her own, and suddenly she has a chance when she meets this young girl. Her sort of frosty core, which she's been protecting herself throughout her life, by the sheer love which comes from Leah Bona, who's the most incredible 11-year-old actress we found. She melts her core. And I think as an audience, as she starts to warm to Alita, then I think the audience falls in love with Koselwa even more. And that then puts us in, when her life becomes in jeopardy, it then really, we're so invested in her, but also in the relationship and this potential sort of surrogate mother-daughter world which we've created, that I think that's probably the reason why the violence feels more impactful.
Yeah, it's a tough scene, but I know why the scene is so tough. Now there is a scene in this film that I played over and over and over again because Letha, the actress who plays Letha, all I can say is wow. Her performance is absolutely incredible for someone. Isn't this her first role?
Yeah, it's her first acting experience ever.
How'd you
Her
find
name
her?
is her name is Leabona Mkhorotoza, and her neighbor was auditioning for this, and her neighbor, and her neighbor was trying to get into acting, and so she suggested that Leabona, because she knew Leabona was interested. So Leabona taped something in her living room in the location where she lives with her mom, and we had overlooked her audition because initially we were looking at 9-year-olds. I know, dumb choice for a writer, but we had overlooked her audition because she was a little older. So when the 9-year-olds didn't work, we went back when we found her tape. Cindy found her tape, and then they couldn't find her. They couldn't find Leabona. She didn't have an agent. There was no information. Finally, they tracked her down, and we got her in. And it was lightning in a bottle. She was so natural. She could. We had her read in the room with Machaula, the guy who plays her dad, and he was in the callback with her. And Cindy is just tremendous at working with kids and getting a performance out of people. And she does it in 30-second and 1-minute spans with her commercials. And so she's very good at that. And she just drew it out of this kid, and it wasn't difficult. In fact, there were times where Cindy had to just temper her down a little bit because she was just crying, and she was, the emotions were just out there for everyone to see. It was extraordinary to watch. I was sitting in the room watching from the back going, what? It was
Oh,
it was magic.
and so I'm going to bring up this one scene. Doesn't give anything away. Whichever one of you wrote it can talk about it. Now, this is the scene that I played over and over and over again because there's just something about it. Letha, so this is the scene between Letha and the Ranger after the whole commotion thing happened. And Letha tells herself, I am big. And she says it at least 3, maybe 4 times. And I would pause the film and I'm like, okay, replay it. I would pause it again. I'd replay it. And I'm like, she's in Africa. She's 10, 11 years old. She doesn't have a mom. She has a father and a grandmother. She tells herself, I am big. Meaning she is strong. She can handle this and get through this situation. Whichever one of you wrote this scene, why was it important for her to affirm herself like that as she is just a young girl?
I think me
wrote that.
did you write that?
Yeah, it was. So I remember watching The Champ, and when he was poring over his dad and telling Champ, "Get up, get up, get up," that stuck with me. That's one scene I remember watching and I was beside myself in the theater, and I remember that so clearly to this day, how distraught I was. And I remember thinking that this kid has to now be big. He has to now grow up. And I remember I had lost my dad early on, and I remember just being so incredibly moved by that thought process of what this kid now has to do. Because I originally wrote this as for a little boy. It's kind of what I knew. And the ranger was a guy as well. But then through some fantastic discussions, we said, yeah, this has got to be a little girl and it's got to be a female ranger. And then I think along with that, just that image that I had in my head of this child who had lost everything and seen somebody die now has to, in an instant, grow up and take on the world. And her performance in it, the way we shot it, and I think also the surrounding, the ins and outs of that scene as well were a collaboration with Darwin and Will. That was a little different when it was originally written. So that became a better scene in its entirety, and then adding to that, we have this child acknowledging what needs to happen. The way that she sits in it, I think is what gives it so much gravity.
Yeah,
It makes me emotional thinking about it.
the
Just to jump on
balance,
Yeah.
the balance of the scene, though, and I don't want to give this away because I want everybody, when they see this film and to finally see this film, everybody needs to see this film. In this situation with Letha, she then comes the scene where she says the opposite, but she's not talking about herself.
Mm.
And I went and I just paused it and I'm like, you got a lot of guts, girl. But then I got to thinking, as I paused the scene, I got to thinking, I said, okay, this is the thing about children. They're very observant when we don't think they are watching us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what came out in this scene with her and confronting the one that caused this whole mess.
Mm.
Or at least one of the ones that caused this whole mess. And I was like, wow. And again, it goes back to you couldn't have found a better child for this part.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
got really lucky. Yeah, thanks.
I mean, because ultimately, obviously, the theme is, and why we made the film is rhino conservation. But the story, in order to bring human beings in and empathetically identify with the story, you have to talk about how they're affected. So even though the theme is rhino conservation, the story is about a young woman who self-actualizes, who finds a mentor and learns to step into her role that has meaning, that's going to take on the rest of her life. And so the moments that you're talking about on that staircase to that realization are the moments that we all have along our life when we have mentors that step in and teach us things or hold an anchor point for our decision making. And it's about her growth into that new role.
Yeah, the thing about, and you bring up a great word, mentor. Everybody needs a mentor. But this film shows and proves that sometimes we meet those people in our lives, even for a split second, but that split second is now a definite moment in one's life and puts them on a brand new course they never saw coming. And that's what happened to Letha. And I love the way that the particular scene when Rob shows up to the scene. And I'm not going to give what's going on, but the words,
very well.
Yeah, the words that Rob said, I'm going to at least say what he said, because the moment he says it, there's a very slight pause, and then the film goes blank. And I sat there and I kept rewinding it, and I'm like, does he know? And I was like, does it matter? And I'm like, but this is that shining light and that spark. This is where it grabs, to me, it grabs the audience and says, it is up to you from this point forward, because you saw this film. This is why, not just the rhinos, but it's the elephants. It could be sharks. This is why we have to step forward to do something to protect creation, especially when they're endangered. But when Rob says, I'm going to need your help, and then bam, I was like, you couldn't ended that any more perfect than that, because that was the ray of hope.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so
Recognized
touched. I'm so touched that this has affected you so much, and you're able to really reflect back on a lot of the conversations which we had as a team when we were writing. I mean, it was this whole process has taken a very long time, and so much care and attention has gone into these moments. So I'm really, really chuffed to hear that it's actually, someone who has a very fine taste for film is able to pick out those. So thank you. And
Incredible.
Well, you're very welcome, because when I was sitting there watching this, that one of the elements that I loved was that you left the audience wondering, does Rob know? Yes, Rob's going to care, but at that very moment, that is not the important part. The important part was saving the rhino. And because there's not as many rhinos as there are humans, so we need to focus on what really matters. So I love that element of the film. But let's talk about this music score, which was done by the incredible John Powell. And ladies and gentlemen, John Powell has done some incredible work. One of my favorite animated films of all time is How to Train Your Dragon. I love that film. I could watch it over and over again. He did Kung Fu Panda, Ferdinand, just to name a few. How in the world did you team up with John for the score?
Well, the journey with John has been long. He basically has an incredible heart and wanted to support this film and support people from the community making music. And he introduced us through a viral Instagram video that his partner had showed him to the Tanda Choir, which is a group of young people in the township of Kailicha, just outside of Cape Town. And this is a young group of people over the last year have come together and created this phenomenon. Actually, they played with the Dave Matthews Band, and they're going from strength to strength. So John basically suggested that we get them together. Will reached out to a group of overtone singers from a small village in the Eastern Cape, and we collaborated with many other composers, a double bass player from LA, and some musicians, Loyola Lenga, and some of his friends, and we brought together this incredible melange of different sounds. And then John, who was so busy, he's doing Wicked 1, Wicked 2, live action How to Train Your Dragon, and he just said, "Look, I will help you make this happen." And he has been so generous and so kind, brought us into the studio, and he basically put together all these elements to create this incredible score, which is just touching people all over the world. And it's been amazing to see how audiences over the last 12 months have been responding to this.
Yeah, you sent me a clip of the Tandy Choir, and they're just incredible. And I always love watching African choirs. I love the singing. There is an emotion that you just can't describe from the music in Africa. I had the opportunity to interview international recording artist Jonathan Butler, who is from South Africa, and he would love this film because this guy is just music from head to toe. And then when you sent me that clip, Darwin, and I was watching the choir, I was like, there is so much talent in Africa, and not only do we need to save the rhinos and the elephants, but a lot of these people need to have that chance.
Where we want to go as Thunder Choir is essentially we want to build a music school in Kailicha for all these members here and for the extended family of Khayelitsha. Khayelitsha has amazing talent in it that's kind of gone undiscovered for so many years, and the reason that these choir members don't, kind of make it out into the music industry or explore that space is because of their lack of opportunities.
To share their culture with the rest of the world. And this is one way to do it with this incredible film. So I love that element of this film. But for all of you, how in the world does it feel to have a short film that is Oscar qualified?
Yeah, it's
surreal at this point, but obviously super honored and excited. We're just really thrilled that audiences are responding to the film that we care about, and all the people that put so much work into telling the story, because we care about the issue, obviously. And just having a chance and having more and more people see it, the more people will care or connect with the issue of rhino conservation, and the more that they will be introduced to the Tanda Choir, to Leah Bona, and to all these incredible artists that have lent their skills to make the story possible.
Yeah, this film has, I guess I can say it, this film has the element, I'll say the element of, I don't like making promises, but this film has the element of the Oscar written all over it. And I see a lot of film, and there are only certain films that when I watch them, I can sit there and I can honestly go, yeah, this one needs to be at the top. And I don't say that often, because films come and go. I mean, I've seen films, I'm like, okay, yeah, that was nice, but then there are films that you're like, oh my gosh, or wow, and this is The Last Ranger. Everything about it, everything about this film was done absolutely to perfection. The cinematography is beautiful. The music score is great. The acting is just something to literally just brag about, because it is so good. The storyline is perfection, because again, I will say it over and over and over again, you left no stone unturned. It was so well balanced from all of the perspectives of the characters. And I know you had already alluded to sitting in the audience at some of the festivals, but after the film is shown, what are the most common questions you receive?
Well, people often is there's so much crying going on. There's very few questions for a while.
I think we get a lot of people asking how they can help.
Yeah,
which is the idea, which has been a good sign. What can they do? How can they help?
They ask how they can help. They ask how we found Leah Bona and Avumile, the ranger. They ask how many rhinos are left. People really sit in it for a minute. We've gone up on stage before for a Q&A, and we've had filmmakers standing next to us, reaching over to us, going, and we're like, thanks. That's what we wanted. We wanted people just to sit in it, to think about it, and to ask questions.
It's really interesting, because I mean, me and Will have been, working in the edit for 2 years, and we've seen this film. I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, more than one would ever imagine. And I've only just stopped crying during it, and then suddenly you go into a theater, and then you see all these people being affected. And then I find it hard to answer questions. I mean, even just talking about Leah Bona and her mastery, without even realizing what a genius she is. I get choked up just talking about it. And, I think one thing that people haven't, because her performance is so clear and so front of and center, the performance of Avamile as the ranger is so subtle and is so deep. And she does what I think myself as an actor wish I could do. She's able to inhabit this character because she's a very different person in real life. And she really gives the canvas and the truth that allows the extreme emotion which comes from this young person. I mean, without that support, you couldn't have that level of emotion. But what the connection between the two of them and the depth of reality which they created in a very short time, because we only had 4.5 days to shoot this. We had 5 days, but somebody got COVID, and we had to shut down the first day of filming, and the whole film nearly went to shreds. We had to be there was no COVID tests in the Eastern Cape, so we had to fly in a nurse from Joburg at 6 a.m, and we had to be tested in a field one by one. And if one other person was positive, the whole thing was basically had to be terminated. So we were under so much pressure, and it was during the pandemic. So, there was lockdowns everywhere. We had to have special, entry visas. We had to get everyone into the reserve. I mean, it was an incredible. We had to drive the crew from Cape Town, which was a 12-hour ride of all the kit. So logistically, it was so much. And we'd just flown over from LA, and it was just it was this incredible coming together, and so many things had to come right. I mean, it had rained out of nowhere for days and days and days before we stopped shooting. The day we arrived, the rain stopped for the first time in like 3 months. The day we wrapped, started pouring it down again.
Yeah, I would say that's a divine God moment. Parting the clouds.
Yeah, and the fact that we were also working with real rhinos in a wild game reserve with lions walking around us. We were always on call. The scouts were always out and about. The rangers were always out and about in vehicles, making sure that we weren't getting encircled, by anything dangerous. The fact that we could find the rhinos, because the rhinos that we worked with, we didn't know if we could find them. They might have been off on another part of reserve hiding, or, the luck, as Darwin says, the luck that was involved is just incredible. We got everyone on there. Our production team in South Africa, Star Films, Adam Tal and Nomta Dano, they were extraordinarily brave to take this on. And the reason I think Adam took it on was because my sister works as a director for his production company, and she had asked if he was something he would wanted to do, and they wanted to get into more long form. And there were checkpoints along the way that he was like, yeah, guys, I don't know if we can pull this off. I don't think it's going to happen. And we're like, well, we've just raised the money and we're coming. Well, are you sure you want to push back a week? Well, we can't, because this is the window that we have to film it in. Otherwise the game reserve is going to have students there. And well, maybe we should take a minute. And we're like, there is no minute. It's now or never. And so we all just poured in there with everything, and everybody stepped up. It took a village. It really did.
Yeah,
and
the night that we
finished, people were in tears. People had worked with the rhinos. The crew and the actors had seen something they had never seen before themselves. There was this incredible sense of accomplishment and storytelling that is going to hopefully make a difference. And I felt like everyone really could feel that.
Well, I have a question, because after seeing this film multiple times, is there any talk about taking the concept and actually creating a full-blown documentary?
A full
Feature.
Yeah,
a full feature, either based on saving the rhinos, as well as incorporating the life and dedication of the rangers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's whisperings of that. That would be a first choice, a first prize. Um, when I originally wrote this, it was a big stab at a blood diamond, but for rhinos. Because I have all this information from Dr. Foles and his team and the Global Conservation Force guys who work hand in hand with agencies in America and around the world, obviously, and in South Africa, that combat these dark forces, as it were. And so there's a lot of intel there, and there's a lot that we know. So to access all of that and write a powerful film is not a long shot, really. We would need the backing and then the go-ahead. So, my writing skills just weren't, when I took a stab at it, it was way out of my depth, not in my wheelhouse, as they say. So when Will and Dar came along and chose my story and asked if I wanted to collaborate, I was all over that. I'm all about bringing in people who are more skilled than you to make the product shinier and better.
Well, y'all have created, I think, one of the most talked about short films of the year. Everything you've received so far is extremely well deserved, and I want to see this one go all the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, that's exciting to hear from your corner of the world. Thank you.
Well, you're
What
very,
I'd-
very well. No, go
We
ahead.
want to see it go all the way as well.
What I'd love to say to you and to the audience is you can go to our website at kindred.org and hear some of the actors and talking about the actual project. And there's some really beautiful little anecdotes and stories from which you won't hear anywhere else. So yeah, if anybody fancies it, it's kindredfilms.org.
kindredfilms.org, and ladies and gentlemen, you need to check that out. I've been to the website, and it is amazing to hear what everybody says about this film, those that worked on this film. And whenever you get the chance to see it, you got to add this one to your list, because ladies and gentlemen, The Last Ranger is an incredibly compelling, heart-stopping, and a heartbreaking short film. It teaches us many things about life. We have been called to steward, amplify, and enjoy creation on Earth. We've been the keepers of the gate since the days of Adam and Eve, but we've left the gate open to poachers. Now, The Last Ranger is a multi-award winning film and Oscar qualified for good reason. The most important element of this film is that it reaches to the very depths of your soul and shows you again how precious life is, both animal and human. Now, for example, rhinos are facing extinction, with about 16,800 white rhinos and 6,400 black rhinos left in the world. But there are only 2 northern white rhinos remaining. Now, poaching in South Africa rose by 900% between 2009 and 2013, and 1,349 rhinos were killed that year, and they were placed on the endangered species list. On average, 1 rhino is poached every day. Now, over a 10-year period, from what I've understood, 1,000 rangers have lost their lives protecting them. So there's immense pride to protect the rhino, the elephant, and other endangered species. And these rangers, they need protection. And they need to be paid more, by the way. But hey, if we don't help stop the poaching of rhinos and other endangered species, we could be looking at the last ranger for real, and even the last of creation. And David, Darwin, and Will, I want to thank you so very much for sharing this incredible film with us today. And again, definitely one of my favorites this year. And I'm going to keep my eye on your Oscar journey, because this one should get very exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We're honored. Yeah, thank you for taking the time.
Oh,
Wow.
absolutely.
Extraordinary
And
to hear that.
yeah, all 3 of you, David, Darwin, Will, you've created a film that's going to have and this is what's rare about The Last Ranger. You've created a film that will have a lasting impression, not only on the audience, but also in the areas of helping to save the rhino from Extinction. And that, I thank you. And for all of you, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching. You'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.